Hey there, students. Before we get into our new topic today of multiplying a monomial by a polynomial, I wanted to review with you negative exponents, since some of you did not watch the video on Friday during the quiz. Here, I want to simplify these expressions, and this is similar to what we did just before the quiz, which is dividing this monomial by this monomial. Before we can do that, we have to take care of the negative exponents. So I have x to the negative third power times y to the fourth power, and then we also have x to the negative second power times y cubed. And before we can expand this out and eliminate our x's and our y's, the exponents must be positive. So when we rewrite this, the x to the negative third power is going to be moved to the denominator so that the exponent can be positive. And on Friday, I kind of showed you why this is in the calculator when we looked at those numbers that were to the negative exponent power. And my other negative exponent is x to the negative second power. Well, that is going to move up to the numerator so it can become positive. Now my y's are fine, so y to the fourth power and y cubed, those stay the same, and I can write those exactly where they are. Now this is like any other problem that we've done before. I have x squared times y to the fourth power, x cubed times y cubed, and then we can write this out. Use the expanded method, so x squared is x times x, and then y to the fourth power is y times y times y. Then I look at x cubed, well that's just x times x times x, and then I have y cubed, so that'd be y times y times y. And then I want to go through and figure out, well, how many x's can we eliminate if there's 2 in the numerator and 3 in the denominator? We can eliminate 2, and that leaves me a single x, and then that single x is located in the denominator. So this is in the denominator, which means my x and the answer must be in the denominator. Now I look at, can I eliminate any of the y values? Well, we have 4 of the y's in the numerator, 3 in the denominator. So I go through and start eliminating y's. I have a single y left, and that single y is left in the numerator. And this will be my answer, y divided by x. So y divided by x is equivalent to this expression here. Let's go ahead and do another one. And we'll do this example together because I know negative exponents are fairly new. So same as the first one, except now the negative exponents are on the y's, the y variable. So if I have x to the negative fifth power, that is going to be rewritten in the denominator. And I also have x to the negative fourth power, which is negative in the denominator. So when I write this over here, it's going to be in the numerator. It's going to move up to the numerator so that the exponent can be positive. And my x's are okay because it's x to the fourth, x squared, and I can just write those where they can stay where they're located at because they're not negative exponents. And then when I go to simplify this, I just expand it out. So I have x times x times x times x. This x to the fourth power is expanded out like this. And then I have y times y times y times y. This y to the fourth power gets expanded out like this. And then I go to my denominator, I have x squared, so that's x times x. And then I have y to the fifth power, and so that's y times y times y times y times y. We look at what can we eliminate. If there's 4 x's in the numerator and there's 2 x's in the denominator, I can eliminate 2. And that means I'm left with 2 x's in the numerator. And so when we put that together, it's x squared. I could do the same thing with the y's now. Look at my y values, what can I eliminate? Here's a pair, here's one, here's another one, here's another one. So I have a single y left over, and that is in the denominator. And so this will be my answer, x squared divided by y. This is equivalent to the answer we started with. And so that's just an exponents review when we look at negative exponents and also dividing monomials. For today's lesson, we are going to look at what happens when we take a monomial and we multiply it by a polynomial. In this case, I have a monomial, and I want to multiply it by a binomial first, and then we're going to look at a monomial times a trinomial. So we should know that here we must use the distributive property. If I'm going to remove these parentheses and simplify this expression, I need to take negative 5x and multiply it by this x and also this 2. So I can put a 1 here. And I know that if I take this negative 5x, I'm going to take negative 5x and I'm multiplying that by 1x. And I'm going to write this out so that you can see the multiplication, because oftentimes when we do the distributive property, we no longer write this step out because we've gotten good at it. But that's because we were only multiplying a number or a constant by a variable or by another number. In this case, we're multiplying an entire monomial, which includes a variable, and so I wanted to write this out so that we can see how it looks. And then I'm also going to take this negative 5x and multiply it by negative 2. So I'm going to take my negative 5x, and that's being multiplied by negative 2. And so this step here is just showing me what I'm distributing. We took the negative 5x, multiplied by 1x, and we took the negative 5x and multiplied it by negative 2. So if I were to simplify this, negative 5 times 1, well, that's just negative 5. And then x times x is x squared. And similarly over here, I have negative 5x, or I have negative 5 times negative 2, which that is positive 10. And then since there's no other x, I just keep the x in my problem. And so this is my answer, and my answer is a binomial. So I want you to try and multiply this one. Take this 2x and multiply it by 3x, and take this 2x and multiply it by 1. So this should be the answer that you received, 6x squared minus 2x, and this shows the distributive property here. And this is also a binomial because it has two terms. All right, let's look at what happens when we multiply a monomial times a trinomial. Remember, a trinomial has three terms, so each term is separated by an operation symbol, and I want to take this negative 1/2 x and I want to multiply it by this term, by this term, and by this term. To do this, we utilize the distributive property, so I take my negative 1/2 x, so negative 1/2 x, and that's being multiplied by the first term, which is 2x squared. Well, I'm going to multiply negative 1/2 x by each term, so I have to do that again. So if I take negative 1/2 x and multiply it by negative 4x, so negative 1/2 x times 4x, and actually that should be times negative 4x. And I have one more term, so negative 1/2 x, so negative 1/2 x times 3. I have one more term, negative 1/2 x times 3. And then we go through and we start simplifying. Now for this, I'm only multiplying the coefficients, so negative 1/2 times 2. If you're not sure what that is, then use your calculator. So calculator, control divide, I have negative 1/2, and we're multiplying that by 2. So see, that's negative 1. So I'll go back over here. This is equivalent, or this is negative 1. And then to figure out my x's, I have a single x here, and then I have two x's here. So this x and these two x's make x cubed. So imagine if these were written out, this would be x and then xx. There's three of them. So I go to the next one. I have negative 1/2 times negative 4. So I go back to my problem. So control divide, negative 1/2, and we're multiplying that by negative 4. So see, that's positive 2. So go back over here. that was a positive 2. And then I have an x times another x. So there's 2 of those x's, that becomes x squared. And now I do negative 1/2 times 3. So again, I go back, control divide, negative 1/2 times 3. It's just negative 3/2. So I'll go back to my answer, and this is negative 3/2. And this is my final answer, which is a trinomial. Because I can't combine any of those terms, or not like terms, we get a trinomial. So I want you to try this one in a similar way. Take negative 2/3 x and distribute it to the first term. Take it again, distribute it to the second term. Take it again, distribute it to the third term. I do want you to show this step here. This is showing the distributive property, and then the answer I circled is the result when we do the multiplication. So this is what you should have gotten when you distributed negative 2/3 x. So negative 2/3 times the first term. In your calculator, if you're not sure how I got negative 4, take negative 2/3 times 6, and that'll be negative 4. And then x times x squared is x cubed, and then so on. And again, this is the work here written out, and then this step here is when it's simplified. And for our last example in the notes, we're going to find the area of this rectangle. So area is something that you learn in an earlier grade level, and we can use that concept here when we look at multiplying a monomial by a polynomial. Area of a rectangle is its length times its width. So with this particular figure, it doesn't really matter which one is the length or which one is the width. I know that ultimately I'm going to take this number and multiply it by this number. So if I were to set this up, it would be 4x times x squared minus 2x plus 1. And I'm going to be taking the 4x and multiplying it by the x squared like before, by 1x squared. So 4x times 1x squared. And then I'm going to take that same 4x and I'm going to multiply it by negative 2. So 4x times negative 2x. And I'm going to take that same 4x yet again and multiply it by 1. So 4x times 1. And then we simplify. So if I go back to my 4x times 1x squared, well, 4 times 1, 4. And then I have x times x squared. That means that would be x cubed, because there's 3 x's being multiplied by itself. This is x to the first power, and then x squared means x times x. Now if I move on to the next term, so 4x squared times negative 2x, 4 times negative 2, well, that's negative 8. And then my x times x is just x squared. And then lastly, I have 4x times 1. Well, that just stays the same, and I'll put a plus sign here since the answer is positive. And so this is my answer. 4x cubed minus 8x squared plus 4x is the area of this rectangle. And so I'm going to have you try this one over here. Take this term times these 3 terms, and let's see if you can find the area of the rectangle. This is the area you should have gotten if you set it up as 2x times this trinomial. Notice that the pink represents the 2x times the first term, the green represents the 2x times the second term, and the blue, it represents the 2x times the last term. And then when we find those products, this is what we get, and this is our trinomial. And so today's notes, once again, was about multiplying a monomial, which is a single term, by a polynomial, which is many terms. And you'll be able to work on the practice today, and then tomorrow we'll do a little more practice before we move on with our topic.